Instead, we have the opportunity to make a habit of empathy, to recognize ourselves in each other.
When little babies are in a nursery and one baby cries, the other babies will start crying in response. They don't know why, but the biology is telling them to cry because they are empathic. But it's only around 2.5 years old when that toddler can see themselves in a mirror and say, oh, that's me, I'm Johnny, I'm a me, and you are you. When we begin to develop selfhood, we can mature empathy. Empathy goes hand in hand with individuality, with selfhood. As we get a little older, let's say around 3, a parent starts to teach their child induction scripts. Now, this is new. This didn't happen before in history. This is the therapeutic generation in this room, to show you how empathy evolves. In previous periods of history, if your little child took another little child's toy and ran away with it, and the other little child cried, what would you do to the kid 150 years ago, your child? You'd whack him, and you'd shame him. Bad. As we move to the age of psychological consciousness, this is an empathic evolution. What does a parent do now? Their little child steals another little child's toy, the other child cries. You take your child aside, and you say, look at Johnny, he's crying. Look what you did. Try to imagine. Empathy is based on imagination is based on wonder, and wonder is based on awe. Empathy is the deepest spiritual value. Just have to cut it from its religious institutional biases. So you say to your little child, how would you feel if Johnny did that to you? And then say, go over to Johnny. So Billy goes over to Johnny and sees Johnny's tears, and then the empathic distress kicks in and Billy starts crying. Then mom or dad says to their child, well, why don't you give him the toy back or kiss him? What the parent is teaching him is guilt. Guilt cultures are very different than shaming cultures. Shaming cultures have been traditional. That's why empathy didn't extend as fast as it could. In a shaming culture, you're bad, you don't live up to the norm, we ostracize you. That cuts off the empathic drive completely. Traditional shaming cultures across all religions really repress that empathic drive. But the therapeutic drive is guilt. Now, I know most of you are Jewish, think guilt's been here all the way since the beginning of time, but that's just not true. Guilt is saying to that little child, I really believe in humanity, your humanity, and if I can put this in context to you so you understand what you did, you'll do the right thing as a human being because you actually would like to feel the other's experience as yours and do the right thing. That's what guilt's all about. So these are ways that parenting styles change over history, but empathy is very complicated. Empathy is the opposite of utopia. A lot of people think, oh, empathy, utopia. My friends, there's no empathy in heaven. Can't have it. There's no empathy in utopia because empathy is based on the fragility, the vulnerability, the mortality, the misgivings, the failings of human beings. And one becomes more empathic as one becomes more understanding that one has a life and a death. Around 7 or 8 years old, a kid learns about where they came from, they're going to live, and then they're going to die. This allows the development of self, and then I understand I have a one and only life. It's fragile, it's vulnerable, and then I can existentially begin to reach out to another person, realize you have a one and only life, you have your own journey, you have your own history, and when I actually feel your plight, your condition, I actually have in that the width of death and the celebration of life. I can actually feel that you have a one and only life. You're struggling to flourish and be. It's tough to be alive, whether you're a human being or a fox in the wood. Very tough to be alive, and I'm rooting for you. I can actually feel your vulnerability, your one and only life, and I'm trying as best I can to show solidarity with you and celebrate you. Is that what empathy is about? God probably can't empathize, because to empathize you have to have mortality. You have to have a life and a death. It comes with the sufferings and failings and then hoping to struggle and flourish and be. It's a wonderful, complex sensibility, and it's how we transcend ourselves. It's those moments when we reach out of ourselves to another. We don't lose our identity, but we can feel the other as if it's ourselves, and we meet in that I-thou hinterland that Martin Buber talks about, and we connect, and we feel super alive, and we feel really alive, correct? Complicated. we have a paradox in history. It's really kind of a sad paradox. It's an interesting paradox, and I read about it in this book, and I have not seen it discussed before in history, but I suspect that I really believe this exists. The paradox is that it's called the empathy-entropy paradox in my mind. And that is, as we create these more complex energy-producing civilizations, all right, and we bring more communications together so that we can bring more people together in more individualized but integrated complex environments, we can stretch the central nervous system, heighten our empathy, move to more associational ties with people who are not just blood kin. All of that's made possible by these complex energy-producing civilizations, but those same civilizations, as they become more complex, use more energy, deplete more resources, and create an entropy bill. Go back to the ancient hydraulic civilizations, the entropy bill, salinization of the irrigation systems collapsed the civilizations. Go to Rome, great complex society. It was brutal, but a great empathic surge called Christianity, urban Christianity in the 1st and 2nd century. But by the 7th century, that great empire with 1.5 million people in Rome was reduced to rubble with 60,000 people walking the streets in shambles. Why? They denuded the soil base. They overtaxed the agriculture to maintain the empire. So we have a situation today where we have the most complex, integrated, interdependent society ever, correct? Mm-hmm. And we're beginning to stretch empathy all the way to the far reaches of the poles. The penguins and the polar bears on the poles. Mm-hmm. But the same complex civilization allows us to connect ourselves, stretch our central nervous system, become more empathic associationally, is using up vast reserves of the world's energy and taking us to the brink of extinction. The bittersweet irony of this conundrum, the empathy-entropy paradox, we just beginning to glimpse the possibility of global biosphere consciousness. We can smell it. Think of the reaction in Haiti, the whole world. We can feel it. But at the same time we can feel that summit, we sense we may be on the verge of extinction at the same moment. Huh? How do we break the empathy-entropy paradox? We are on the cusp of a third industrial revolution, a new convergence of communication and energy. I don't know if we'll get there in time. We had a very powerful ICT revolution, communication revolution in the last 10 years, the personal computer and the internet, satellite, wireless, and Wi-Fi connection. We outed the central nervous system of 2 billion people, to quote Marshall McLuhan. I should say, to quote his professor, Harold Innis, actually, 2 billion people connected at the speed of light. This new communication revolution is different than the first generation electricity. The telegraph, telephone, cinema, radio, TV was centralized top-down. This new communication revolution, and this is the key word to take home with you, is distributed, distributed, distributed. 2 billion people with a small utensil in their hand can take their own video, audio, and text and send it to each other at the speed of light, distributed across the planet. This distributed ICT revolution, I was just up at Microsoft. Tomorrow I'll be at Google. And it's interesting, what I said at Microsoft day before yesterday in Seattle is we've been trying to take this distributed ICT revolution and graft it onto a second industrial revolution whose energies were centralized, whose business models were centralized. So a distributed communication revolution against a centralized energy regime is a misfit. So we've never got the full productivity out of it. What's happening now in the last 18 months is this distributed communication revolution is just now converging with a new energy regime, distributed energy. When distributed communication converges with distributed energy, we have a powerful third industrial revolution that can move us to distributed communication across the central nervous system of the human race, distributed energy across all the continents, distributed consciousness. What are distributed energies? Well, compare them to elite energies, which we're familiar with. Coal, oil, gas, and uranium are elite energies because when you go home this afternoon, chances are you won't find them in your backyard. They're elite because they're only found in certain pockets of the world. They require huge military investments to secure them, huge military geopolitical investments to manage them, and tremendous capital to organize them. Be clear, fossil fuels and uranium and the industrial way of life is the most centralized top-down energy civilization in all of history. And those energies are sunsetting, they've exhausted their S-curve, and that infrastructure built on them is completely on life support. That's where the denial comes in by world leaders and business leaders.